everybody, Steven here, and today I am looking at the S800 webcam from EMEET. This thing just launched. I haven't done a webcam video in a while. Honestly, I'm usually not drawn to them, but this webcam here drew me in for two main reasons. One, the specs, they're really good, and I'm going to talk about those here in a minute, but also just the smaller size with this. So typically when we're looking at webcams, they can be bulkier. And they do have some where like it goes out to the side and they kind of have like that ovalish type shape. With this one though, this size here is perfect if you're actually going to stream like product reviews and things like that. I think a lot of people, when they think webcams, are going to think Zoom meetings, which is pretty standard. And then maybe if I'm streaming to Twitch and I'm doing some gaming or things like that. Here though, because of this size, if I had multiple of these hooked up and we have like our top-down shot, some from the side, I can actually get a really good video quality out of this and perform those live streams when it comes to, again, product reviews or testing or anything like that. It's also not going to break the bank because this does have a good price tag that I'll talk about here in a little bit. So that was the draw for me. So here, just some quick basic specs. We got 4K 30 FPS with this, or you can do 1080p at 60 FPS. We're going to get an 8 megapixel camera, and then this has a 1/2 inch Sony sensor in it. Looking right at the front of this, so we have the f1.8 for this, and then it'll just tell you that it is the 4K. And then it has a 4x optical zoom. We also have two omnidirectional microphones in this. When I actually shift over to the software, I'm going to use this for the rest of the video. So you actually can compare this beginning portion to what the webcam looks like. And just for reference, this is the Sony FX30 camera that I'm using here with a Sigma 16mm lens on it. So that's the kind of the big draw, is the quality of the video that you can get out of this, along with the USB-C to 3.0 port on this. So you can actually get 5 gigabytes per second of video transmission. So we shouldn't have any issues when it comes to any lossless audio or video or anything like that when we are doing these streams. With all that being said though, let's actually shift over now and showcase what this thing looks like when we're using it, and I'm going to use that for the remainder of the video. All right, so this is the actual webcam in use right now along with the microphone. In terms of like the sound quality of the microphone, it sounds like a wireless headset to me. So it's actually decent enough for Zoom meetings and things like that, but if you're gonna do certain videos where you're streaming, you're creating content, anything like that, you're probably most likely going to use an external microphone, which I will switch over to once we shift into the kind of back half of the video. I do want to cover the specs that I mentioned earlier. We'll go through this in full detail. I mentioned the f1.8 on this. We have the 4K at 30 FPS, and then we have 1080p at 60. In the software now, which is what we are looking at on screen here, this by default is 1080p 60 FPS or 60 hertz. You can switch over to 50 if you want. But with this, there isn't the option to change this over to 4K 30 via the software that I can find. You're going to need to use other software. And I'm actually going to shift over to OBS here in a little bit when we do the back end of the video, and I will switch it then over to 4K. So interesting with their software that they don't allow you to do that. I'm not quite sure why that is. I do wish they had that with the software. But let's look at the specs here. We have the 8 megapixel camera here, which I think quality-wise, even at 1080p, looks really, really good. Then we're going to have the 1/2 inch Sony sensor. We have AI autofocus here, but you can actually turn that off if you want. I'll look at that here in a second. We have the 4x digital zoom. In terms of the field of view, 40 to 73 is what it's showing on the software here. So if I actually start to scale that in, and that's essentially the zoom, right? And then we're going to have the video pickup range is 10 to 300 centimeters. This does have HDR. When you turn this on, I mean, if you're displaying in HDR, it's going to look decent. You do have that weird kind of mode there where, like, I think even if I'm turning my head, it actually starts to get a little bit more warm in terms of color temperature. You don't have to use this, but if you are using HDR on your monitor, that is an option for you. The exposure, the white balance, the black light compensation, all of this you can turn on automatic, which is nice. Audio, so we have the two omnidirectional microphones. Pickup range are saying 10 feet with this. Yeah, probably good again for Zoom calls and things like that, but not necessarily for like pure content creation. You could use it, but most likely, again, you're going to use an external microphone with this. So that's going to wrap it up for just like the general specs that I want to cover. Let's shift into the software here. So this is EMEET's software. I'm not going to cover everything, but the things I do want to cover, we do have microphone noise reduction, which I do currently have turned on. So I can turn that off right now. You can hear really quick. I usually have like ambient noise from the AC unit and things like that in the background that I try to filter out. So something like that is really nice. We're going to have firmware, user manual, and then preview switch. We have framing grid, rule of thirds, golden ratio, crosshair, and square. And then for this, we have the image flip. If you wanted to actually flip this, that's going to be helpful. Again, if you're streaming or something like that, you're running multiple devices where you're trying to see exactly what the image is that's coming back to you and how that is being kind of translated to the viewer there. Metering mode, center, global, spot, and then face. I've left this generally on face or centered. We'll just put it back over to centered. So a little bit brighter with centered. Actually, I want to leave that on face. Then the focus area, central focus area, and then face focus. And this is where that AI comes into play here. So if I'm here, let's see if it'll do with my hand. If I put my hand, see how it's focused on that now? Take that away, it'll come right back to me. This is going to be very useful. Again, kind of the thing that I think this is going to be great for is anybody that's streaming videos where they're showcasing products. So now you can bring this up into that field of view. You can actually have it so it focuses on that item. And then when you pull it away, it just goes back to where it needs to focus. You can actually change this too. So we have autofocus turned on right now, but I can turn that off and then I can literally slide this and tell it where it needs to focus. We'll go all the way to the background now, which is pretty cool. We have the HDR, we have custom mode. So you can actually customize, obviously, the lighting and all that other stuff. So video customization. So we customization, standard, portrait. And you'll see like it makes the adjustment. And this to me, it looks like it's a little bit sharper. But you got to give it that second. Don't just like click it over and be like, oh man, that looks bad. Wait a second. Let's see how it kind of pans out. Like this would be too much sharpness, right? Object. But this is where, again, streaming videos where we're showing a product where we may want to actually have that a little more crisp in terms of the image. Vivid, I like vivid. And then we have bright, which is going to be helpful if you're in a darker room. And then I'm just going to go back to customization. Any flicker here. So we have the 50 and the 60 hertz. Right now, just leaving it at 60. And then the settings that you can change for the image. So sliders here for brightness, contrast, sharpness, saturation, tone, and then the auto white balance. These are things, again, you can turn off. If I don't want that auto white balance, I can turn that off and then it'll just do whatever it needs to. I think it looks a little bit better with it turned on auto. So all of these, again, are sliders that you can adjust here, which is really nice and gives you a lot of control. But you don't have to use this. That's one of the things that I've noticed with this product is they're like, hey, you can use our software, but really we're expecting you're using OBS, Twitch, whatever streaming software that you're using in order to run the camera. And with that being said, now I do want to switch over to OBS. I will use the Shure SM7B microphone that I usually use for all these videos. And then we'll try to actually upscale this and get this, not even upscale, we'll just turn this over to 4K at the 30 FPS from this 1080p 60 FPS. All right, this is going to be the 4K 30 FPS running in OBS right now. I record in OBS though at 1440p. I export my YouTube videos at 1440p, so do keep that in mind. It will look better in person. With that being said, there is a nice increase in overall fidelity going from the 1080p to the 4K. But you're taking the hit in the FPS department. So you're going from the 60 FPS to the 30 FPS. So it does look, I mean, to me it looks a little bit slower. It's not quite as smooth as the 1080p 60 FPS, but you get a more clear, sharper image. Now, with this, I want to talk about the upside, the things that I like about this camera. First, here, I think video quality is going to matter a lot. And here, this is very crisp, it's clear, it has really good video quality, both at 4K and at 1080p. Now, with that, another feature that I like here is the autofocus. So I've mentioned for a lot of people that are streaming and maybe they're doing content around products where they can put that product in this and it will actually focus on it. I think that is awesome. So I have a custom controller here. So if I put this there, you can actually look at that. It will highlight that, and then you get that nice bokeh around everything else. And then we can take that away, and then it will focus back in on you. I like that feature. So that's another one. I actually think the microphones here are decent as well. For Zoom meetings and things like that, it is going to be really solid for that. I mentioned it kind of sounds like a wireless gaming headset, and to me that's like the closest thing I could think of where it does sound like that, and not in a bad way, in a good way. So here you get, I mean, it's got a little bit of graininess or tinniness to it, but it's not bad. So it is very usable for meetings and things like that. And if you were in a bind, I would say you could even still use this if you were streaming. I think it would be fine for that as well. But most people, they do have a really nice microphone. I'm using the Shure SM7B. You can barely see it at the bottom there. But most people have an external microphone that they're going to use. In a bind, though, you could use this thing. And it does a decent job at trying to filter out external noise and cancel that out. So I think the microphone here is pretty solid. And then the last thing here, and this is a big one, the 5 gigs of data transfer speed with this. The last thing I want to deal with if I'm streaming or anything like that is having an issue with the video quality, and it has to do with the webcam. Now, if you're dealing with buffering issues or your internet is having an issue or anything like that, that's one thing. So completely separate issue. But if I'm having an issue with the camera where now we're getting horrible pixelation, it's getting grainy, it can't keep up, anything like that, that is going to be a huge negative. And I don't want that to be the case. Here, one, I haven't had that issue at all, but the fact that we do have that 5 gigabytes of transfer speed is awesome, because that shouldn't be an issue at all. The thing I think about is, I haven't streamed in a long time, but when I did stream here and there, if I scale down this image, and I'll do that here in a little bit, and I'm in the corner and we're playing a game, and I'm trying to maintain 60 FPS or 30 FPS and 60 FPS with the game, if I'm trying to maintain that and all of a sudden they like unsync, so all of a sudden like what's going on with the webcam isn't nearly the same speed or quality that I'm seeing with the game, that's going to be a problem, right? Or if you were, again, you're trying to do some live stream and you're trying to showcase stuff, and then all of a sudden like the motion on this thing slows way down or whatever it may be, and that to me it looks and leans towards, like, most people are going to be like, well, that's going to be your internet. Well, if that internet wasn't the issue and it was the camera, again, that's going to be a problem. So I do like that. In terms of negatives, I don't have any standout negatives. Like the big things that I want out of a webcam, this has. I want great video quality, and I don't want any issues when it comes to that image. So I don't want it to get grainy, pixelated. I don't, again, data transfer speed. I don't want it to have any of those issues where it's like, man, this thing, it's stuttering. It's like I'm getting a grainy image out of it. I didn't have any issues here. So that's really, really awesome. So those are the big things. And then on top of that, we're getting this pretty solid microphone, which is nice. Now, no outright negatives, which is awesome. A lot of upside with this. I have 2 gray area things. One is, and by the way, these are things you may or may not care about. Now, the first one is going to be the inability to change this over to the 4K 30 FPS with their software. By default, again, it's 1080p 60 FPS, but in their own software you can't change that. But they're also expecting that you're not going to be streaming with their software. You're going to be using OBS or whatever other software that you use in order to stream. So I don't know that everybody's really going to care about that not being there, because again, you're going to use whatever software you're going to use. So it would be nice if it's there. I'm expecting maybe a couple people care when it comes to that, but I think the vast majority of people won't care that it's not actually there, because again, they're using some other software. The other thing here is this does get really hot. They do have that warning on the webcam. They have that heat sink in the back. Like if you touch it, it is hot to the touch. So don't go grabbing this thing. If you've been using it, I'm going to grab the whole thing and move it around. Like, you have to be careful with this. If you're shifting it from one position to another, just be mindful of that. They have the warnings there, but for some people, they're like, well, I don't want my webcam to get hot at all. Like, I want to just grab it and move it. That may be something to consider with this. That's actually the only gray area things that I could think of. There's just a tremendous amount of upside when it comes to this camera. All of that being said, though, I haven't mentioned the price here, and I do want to look at that. And this is now where I get to scale myself down so we can actually look at the pricing. Now, I'm not going to whip out the green screen or anything like that, but if you are using that, you would just see me right here. But let's look at their actual website here. So this is the S800 here. Normal price is $150. At $150, and I mentioned this earlier, I haven't reviewed a ton of webcams lately, but just kind of looking out there, the landscape for that price range, it's pretty competitive. So I think in that there are a lot of things to consider. What are you going to use this for? For me, I've mentioned it through the whole video. I think this is for really people that are streaming. They maybe want, and they even have a bundle that we'll look at here in a second. I'm going to do product like reviews and things like that where I'm going to live stream and I want a multi-camera setup, and or maybe just the top down to start or anything like that, and you can build upon it later. But really, I think it's geared towards that, and then anybody that's streaming, they're playing video games. So those are the big ones. So keeping that in mind, what other webcams may you find out there, even with EMEET and their product lineup? Is it going to suit your specific needs? And I think that's really what you're going to want to look at. So here, I think the AI autofocus, the Sony half-inch sensor, you have HDR if you need it, both modes for the 4K and the 1080p here. And then we have the 0.3 millisecond fast autofocus with this. So again, you could see it where I'm putting something in the camera and taking it away, and it switches really, really quick. That, to me, lends more towards product reviews. But pricing at $150, super competitive. I think at $120, I think, to me, that's a solid price point. $120, the currently discounted rate. And if I get my hands on any codes or coupons or anything like that, I will make sure that those are in the description for you. But here, normal price range, I think $120 is pretty competitive, pretty solid. $150, there's just a lot of options in that price range, so you have more things to consider before you make your final purchasing decision. The other bundles that they have here, though, we have the 5-pack. $560, you'll get 5 of these things. You'll save $190. Now, this is where I was mentioning, like, multi-camera setup. You got a lot going on. And then I could start to think beyond that with, like, what would I do with 5 cameras? What would somebody use? Like, you see sometimes it's a band or something like that, and they have the multi-camera setup, and they're actually doing like a live stream, and they're trying to highlight each musician. Like, they have cameras all set up. Like, this would work for that as well. So you have more options beyond just the things that I'm talking about that you could actually use these for in terms of streaming. So we have that bundle. Streaming bundle, it's actually just this with a light on it. See if it'll pop back up. So they have their little light that you could actually do, which is right here.
or you could buy that separate if you wanted to. And then special bundle is going to come with, looks like some headphones with it. They also have other things that they highlight here. So if you do need a tripod or anything like that, that would be something that you could buy with this. Again, we have the threading on the bottom. So that to me is something that you could use with those multi-camera setups as well. So that's going to wrap this video up. I think EMEET has a great webcam on their hands with the S800 here. This checks the two boxes that I usually have for webcams. I want to make sure that the video quality is really good, and then I want to make sure that the performance is good as well. Here they have both of those, so we do get that awesome 4K 30 FPS or 1080p 60 FPS, along with that 5 gigabytes of data transfer speed where we're not having any issues with the performance. Add on top of that the pretty solid microphone, and you have an overall really great webcam. So I'm gonna have a link for this in the description if you want to pick this up. If I can get any coupons or codes or anything like that, I will make sure those are there for you as well. If you have any questions about this, let me know in the comment section. I will make sure to answer that for you there. And that's going to wrap this one up. If you like the video, hit the like button for me as it helps the channel out. If you want to continue to follow along with all my content, hit the subscribe button for me. And as always, thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.